When starting your erasure drawing, the point is to start with a toned value, typically a mid-tone, which means it's in the middle of the value scale. So I'm going to go through the materials first that you'll need. So we have steel wool, very fine steel wool. Here is your chamois. Here is some pieces of kneaded eraser, blending stump, vine charcoal, and compressed charcoal. You can also use charcoal pencils, and then I'll talk about this white charcoal pencil as well. So I'm going to give you a good demonstration on how to prepare your surface so that it will take the charcoal in a really nice, even way. And that is starting with your fine steel wool. So you want to make sure that whatever your drawing surface is, let's say that this is your drawing paper, you want to lightly and in a circular motion, kind of like you would wax a car, buff up the surface of your drawing paper. Notice how I'm applying even pressure, and I went horizontally. Now I'm going to go vertically to create kind of like a basket weave so that every square inch of that drawing paper is being somewhat sanded. Now you don't want to grind too heavily into your paper because you want it to be smooth and even and not to tear holes in your paper. You also want to make sure that you get all of the steel wool off of your paper. Just let it fall to the tray in your easel, and you can clean it up after the fact. Alright, so now that I've got a nice surface, I'm going to use my compressed charcoal in the same kind of way. So that was up and down, so now I'm going to go side to side. Then I'm going to use my chamois to blend that out so that it's nice and smooth. See how nice and even that is? So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to be doing a value sphere, very standard. And then I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to do stuffed animal fur, because I feel like a lot of you guys are going to be doing stuffed animals. I'm going to be using my vine charcoal because remember, it's easily removable and it's very forgiving in that way. So I'm going to use it to sketch out my composition. And again, for the purposes of this, we're just doing a value sphere and a cast shadow. So understanding the properties of how light works, let's say that my light is coming from this direction. That means that there's going to be a little bit of a highlight here, light here, shadow here, core shadow here, reflected light here, and then cast shadow here. So using my compressed charcoal, I'm going to start with the darker area on the ball, which is the core shadow. Now I'm going to apply pressure in the darkest areas where it needs to be the darkest. And I'm going to drag some of that value up and slightly around the ball. So now I have areas of the dark shadow, which is the core shadow, and areas of the shadow, which is just a little bit lighter, which is right here and right here. And then I'm going to start my cast shadow, which will be the darkest value because it is underneath the sphere and light can't get to it. So right up against it is going to be the darkest, and as it comes out from underneath that, it's going to get a little bit lighter. Now, using my blending stump, I'm going to blend some of that out, clean up the edges. Make sure that it's right up underneath the ball. Blend it out a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing for my core shadow. Blend it out, drag some of that blended or unblended value up, and then down into just underneath the core shadow. Because remember, reflected light is really important to make it feel like it's three-dimensional, because light hits the ball, rolls over it, and then hits the surface that the ball is sitting on and bounces back up into the ball. I'm not pressing down very hard, but I am using the side of my blending stump to blend everything out. And I don't like having that outline where the highlight is, and since it's fine charcoal, it goes away very easily. And so now I have a little bit of a template to use to start building value. So I'm going to make my core shadow a little bit darker, still continuing to spread value around. Now I'm going to use my kneaded eraser to bring back the highlight and then some of the light that is around the highlight as the light hits on the brightest spot and then rolls around the form. And notice how I'm not necessarily smearing, I'm kind of pouncing it. So I'm picking up a little bit of the value. Pink Pearl's going to get me back to pretty close white there. You can also use your kneaded eraser to blend as well. So I'm going to peel a piece of that off and just kind of use it to lightly blend some of that value. Now, remember I talked about reflected light. It's not going to be as bright as the light up here, but it will show up right up underneath the ball. Because I want this ball to stand out from the background, I'm going to add a really dark value around it as a dark background to make it pop forward from the background so that it becomes the emphasis and it stands out. But you'll notice that as I draw, I'm pretty much using the whole side of it, not the tip, because I'm not looking for super detail, but I am using the edge to carve out around the sphere and then drag that value out from it so that I'm not putting value on top of the sphere itself. Now I'm just going to kind of clean it up and make it look the way that I want it to look. Give the surface that it's sitting on a little contrast from the background so that it stands out and stands forward. Now that's pretty good. If I wanted it to be really, really poppy in terms of the contrast of light and dark, meaning the highlight would really pop forward, I can add that white charcoal pencil. You want to make sure that it's clean and it doesn't have charcoal already on the tip, and this will be the last thing that you do. If you use it in the middle of your process of drawing, it's just going to get covered up with charcoal again and it's going to turn gray, and because it's a different material than what this is, it's going to be smoother in sections and it's not going to look good. It's going to look patchy. So make sure that if you're going to use this, it's the very last thing that you do. I'm applying pretty hard pressure here, not enough to tear a hole in my paper obviously, but enough that it covers up the charcoal that's underneath. And notice how I'm lightening my pressure as I go out from the actual highlight. I want to also show my reflected light just a bit. So again, just applying a little bit of heavy pressure there, like I would with colored pencil, right there along the edge. And if I wanted to be super fancy, I could use this to start showing a little bit of the form by using cross contour hatching. And since this ball is round, I'm making it have those cross contour round lines to reinforce that the ball is round. Now you don't have to do this part. I don't personally love it, but I wanted to give you guys the option. Because again, sometimes it can get really muddy and it's really hard to get it back to being pristine. I'm going to take some of the value off with my chamois and blend it a little better. Now you have a value sphere.